A continuación, Broadway conquista la economía mundial.
This is America, and unless you can make money, it don't count.
Never put your own money in the show.
Desde Cats a El Rey León, desde Rent a Wicked, todo en Broadway, el musical americano. Este es el New Amsterdam Theatre, hermosamente restaurado, hogar de El Rey León. Hace solo una década, este edificio se encontraba en estado ruinoso y la calle 42 era una jungla de deterioro urbano. Pero hoy la suerte del musical americano ha cambiado. Florence Ziegfeld produjo aquí sus Follies hace años, pero ahora enormes empresas de medios de comunicación como Disney se han convertido en los nuevos empresarios. Los escenarios de Broadway son los mismos, los actores, la orquesta, pero el negocio del mundo del espectáculo ha cambiado, sobre todo si uno quiere ser productor.
I wanna be a producer with a hit show on Broadway. I wanna be a producer, lunch at Sardi's every day.
I wanna be a producer and sleep until 2:30. I wanna be a producer and say you, not you. I've always wanted to be a producer, or in any way, I would work in the men's room of a Broadway theater. I just wanted to be close to Broadway.
Mel loves Broadway, and in fact, in every single movie, if you think back, he takes a nod to Broadway.
Putting on Ritz, dressed up like $1 million trooper.
The Producers is ostensibly a satire send-up of Broadway types and supposedly holds Broadway characters up to ridicule. And we all know it's exactly the opposite, that it's a love letter to Broadway's tradition, to its history.
En 2001, la comedia musical pareció casi revolucionaria cuando Mel Brooks adaptó su película de 1968, Los Productores, al escenario de Broadway. El musical emparejaba a un contable un poco ganso, Leo Bloom, con el excéntrico Max Bialystock, un productor sin escrúpulos que aceptaba dinero de unas ancianas para financiar sus shows.
I've been a lying, double-crossing, two-faced, backstabbing, despicable crook. But I had no choice. I was a Broadway producer.
There was a man I worked for who was a real Max Bialystock. I can't tell you his name because he might still be alive. He'd be about 104 now. He made wonderful love to ladies over 85 on his leather couch in his office.
It's time for Max to put his backers on their backs and thrill them with amazing acts. Those aging nymphomaniacs.
Anyone could throw in $100 here or there. Things, it was a much simpler time. And so this particular producer did sort of hook up with a lot of little old ladies.
We were desperate, we were drinking, and along came the alley.
And they'd dutifully write out the check to Cash, which was always the name of his latest play, Cash. That's a funny name for a play, and he would usually say, "So is the Iceman cometh."
Max Bialystock is really someone who wants to become a great impresario. And of course, he wants to make money also.
Bloom, the two cardinal rules of being a Broadway producer are: one, never put your own money in the show.
And two,
Never put your own money in the show!
Never put your own money in the show. That is taboo. Ha 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 ha, get it?
El show se convirtió en el primer musical que había que ver en varias décadas. Y era tan difícil conseguir entradas que los productores de la obra podían cobrar $480 por cada butaca VIP.
It's been controversial, but I don't know why it should be. What was happening was that when you had a big hit, all the money was being made by the scalpers. People who had nothing to do with the show's creation were reaping all the benefits from it. And we felt that there had to be something we could do to stop that.
En el siglo XXI, el riesgo económico de un nuevo musical es tan enorme que pocos productores se pueden permitir hacerlo solos.
It's not easy to put on a Broadway musical. It takes a village to put on a Broadway musical. It's very different now than years ago. You'll find that there are many names above the titles with the title of producer.
Behind me, you see a phalanx, an avalanche of Jews who have come with their talent, their money. And one of the Weinsteins is at the end. There's a Scott Zide.
Hizo falta un total de 14 productores y $10 millones para traer esta comedia musical a Broadway. Y muchísimos más magnates de Hollywood y de los medios de comunicación están participando. Pero no hace mucho tiempo que esa figura tan demencial que desbordaba la realidad dominaba la Gran Vía Blanca. Le llamaban el abominable hombre de los shows, David Merrick.
David Merrick was an enigma wrapped inside a conundrum.
He was very difficult to work with.
He was a scoundrel in a kind of theater way, you know, kind of admire him.
Well, Merrick is not one of my favorite characters, you know. Matter of fact, I did what I thought a vicious drawing of him, holding a bell book and candle dressed as Santa Claus. And he bought the drawing and used it as a Christmas card.
To me, he was part of the glamour of the theater, taking fake ads with fake quotes in them. He was a nasty guy, he was a mean guy, but he was a promoter.
Durante una vida profesional que abarcó 40 años, David Merrick produjo docenas de shows, haciéndolo solo a menudo sin otros socios. 6 producciones fueron dirigidas y coreografiadas por Gower Champion, incluido el sísmico éxito Hello, Dolly. En 1980, Merrick volvió a recurrir a Champion para montar La calle 42, el musical entre bastidores en el que Peggy Sawyer sale como una aspirante y regresa como una estrella. La calle 42 fue uno de los primeros musicales cinematográficos adaptados al escenario y el número de artistas fue casi el doble del de la mayoría de los shows de Broadway.
David had taken the profits from a movie that he produced and bought out his only 2 investors for like $1 million apiece, and he now owned the whole thing. And I was having a poker game one night, and I saw him alone on the stage, looking around at the scenery on this empty stage, and I said, David, we've got a big poker game going on tonight. Would you care to join us? And he said, this is my poker game.
Merrick decides he does not want critics to follow the usual system of reviewing in a final preview. He has declared that critics are going to come on opening night, come hell or high water. The Times and other newspapers' positions with, the hell with that, we'll just buy tickets for the last preview. We're not going to let a producer tell us how to cover a show. So then, and this is the kind of balls that Merrick had, he starts canceling previews, which is a gutsy thing to do because it costs him money.
He changed the opening date. He announced there was a bomb threat, a rat in the theater, meaning that there was a critic. We had no idea what was going on.
Listen to the lullaby of
The show ends, and I'm stopped by a man. He says, Frank, I got to talk to you a second. And I said, Can you call me tomorrow? I'm on deadline. By this point, my wife is on the street where she's discovered there are no cabs waiting, and she's frantically trying to hail a cab so we can go back to the Times. He said, but you don't understand. He said, Gower Champion is dead. And I said, what? And Gower Champion had directed the show, was a man in his mid-50s. And I thought, is this a hoax? Merrick was famous for his hoaxes, or what the hell is this?
Merrick waited until the curtain calls and came walking out, and he said, this is a very sad occasion. And we laughed. And he said, I have to tell you that earlier this evening, Gower Champion passed away. That's what our reaction was, and the audience's reaction.
It turned out he died of a very, very rare blood cancer. Merrick had kept it secret, and it was front page news all over the world that he had announced Champion's death from the stage, and even people who didn't know what 42nd Street was, or who Gower Champion, or who David Merrick was, they all knew it now.
That was Merrick, the flair for the press. He was really the end of an era, a no-limit poker player. He would go all in.
La calle 42 se mantuvo en Broadway durante más de 8 años, pero el siguiente musical en ocupar el Winter Garden Theatre se mantendría por un tiempo récord de 18 años. Su productor era Cameron Mackintosh, y durante los años 80 redefinió la fórmula para el éxito en el teatro musical.
To create a show on Broadway, which is something I've never done and never will do, would cost me nearly twice as much money as doing it in London. The rule of thumb is that a show that costs $7 to $8 million in London, here it will cost $12+ million.
La gran oportunidad de Mackintosh se presentó cuando produjo una nueva obra de Andrew Lloyd Webber, que había compuesto éxitos de Broadway tales como Evita y Jesucristo Superstar. El show se llamaba Cats y tenía su origen en una serie de poemas para niños de T.S. Eliot.
Basically, everybody thought we were demented, would be a complete disaster, saying, catastrophe, it's the worst thing you've ever seen in your life. It's a dog.
I listened to it all and I said, Andrew, is this something I don't get? Is this about Queen Victoria, she's the main cat, and Disraeli and Gladstone are other cats, and then there are, poor cats, and am I missing this? And he took a terrible, painful, long pause and said, Hal, it's about cats, and we never discussed it again.
Jellicles do, and jellicles can. Jellicles can and jellicles do. Jellicle cats and jellicle chats. Jellicles all and jellicles do. Jellicle songs and jellicle dance.
It was an extraordinary situation, you see, because it was an unknown producer in Cameron Mackintosh. It was an unknown director in musical theatre terms in Trevor Nunn, and what could he possibly know, with a whole load of poems by a poet. I mean, the list was endless.
En Londres, Cats se convirtió en un fenómeno y consiguió la mayor venta anticipada de entradas de la historia de Broadway. Era muy poco convencional y casi no tenía argumento. Sin embargo, el público no se podía resistir a los felinos danzarines.
A lot of the success had to do with the fact that the show reached across perceived barriers of every kind. First of all, barriers between generations. It was possible for young children, their parents and the grandparents all to go to the theatre together and all get something that was completely delightful out of the same show.
La canción de éxito del show, que recordaba la perdida gloria de Grisabella, la gata glamurosa, ha sido grabada en docenas de idiomas.
memory, turn your face to the moonlight. Let your memory lead you. Open up, enter in.
Con más de 7.000 representaciones, Cats, una importación británica, se convirtió en el show más duradero de la historia de Broadway. Para Cameron Mackintosh, solo fue el principio.
A new day has begun.
Hear the people sing, singing the song of angry men.
Después de Cats, Cameron Mackintosh importó otros éxitos de taquilla de Londres y París, incluidos Los Miserables, El Fantasma de la Ópera y Miss Saigon. El público se estremeció con la resonancia emocional de las historias, con las conmovedoras baladas pop y con el espectáculo lleno de color.
It was the spectacle that beguiled us and we found thrilling, and it was actually truly the case that we began to applaud the chandelier for falling in Phantom and the Opera. We didn't, or we applauded the poor sons of bitches in the Les Miserables who had to keep up with the turntable as they were singing.
Do you hear the people sing, singing the song of angry men?
If you're dealing with big themes, you've got to have it big visually as well as big musically. You're seeing emotions painted larger than life. And if you paint them smaller than life, you might as well sit at home and watch telly or look in the mirror.
I think you can have a huge hit in London and you can have great successes that go around the world, but in the musical theatre, that hit needs to also be a hit on Broadway, and that is what takes it on its final journey around the world.
Mackintosh concibió a Broadway como la pieza central para comercializar shows en todo el mundo. Su enfoque para promocionarlos era radical y sencillo. Los anuncios de los shows no llevaban cita alguna, solo los elegantes e inolvidables logos para los propios shows.
Cameron is one of the last of the guys with a real singular vision of how he thinks a show should be produced, what he thinks it should look like, how it should play, and he's very active as an engaged creative producer.
You are sunlight and I moon joined here.
There aren't many of those types around anymore.
With the flame of love.
Con músicas de Andrew Lloyd Webber y el equipo francés de Alain Boublil y Claude Michel Schomberg, los 4 mejores shows de Mackintosh han tenido unos ingresos brutos de más de $8.000 millones en todo el mundo. Más que La Guerra de las Galaxias, En busca del Arca Perdida, Parque Jurásico y Titanic juntos.
One more dawn, one more day.
And it's all about art. Andrew and I broke the rules when we started our shows, and history proves to us that every 20 or 30 years you have to reinvent the rules. You don't throw out everything you know, but you go, you need to put yourself back into, you know, Mickey and Judy putting on a show in the barn.
Something is stirring, shifting ground, it's just begun.
Merrily We Roll Along fue la 6ª colaboración entre el director Harold Prince y el compositor Stephen Sondheim. Tras su fracaso, después de solo 2 semanas, la asociación que había revolucionado Broadway se quedó estancada.
Art isn't easy, even when you're hot.
Sondheim estaba tan desanimado que llegó a pensar en dejar el teatro para escribir novelas de misterio.
When I first met Steve, he was pretty much down in the dumps. And so naively I said, well, gee, you know, I'm sure we could sit down and think of a show that could be popular, you know, and could be successful. And he kind of looked at me like I was crazy and said, I would never do that.
Asociándose con Lapine, Sondheim creaba ahora su nueva obra fuera de Broadway, en un teatro con aforo para 150 personas, llamado Playwrights Horizons.
Bit by bit, putting it together. Piece by piece, only way to make a work of art. Every moment makes a contribution, every little detail plays a part. Having just the visions, no...
Inspirándose en un cuadro impresionista, Lapine y Sondheim justapusieron la vida de Georges Seurat, el pintor del siglo XIX, con la de su bisnieto George, un moderno artista conceptual.
The art of making art is putting it together, bit by bit.
Sunday in the Park, it was this very intense, very personal show about the painter Georges Seurat and his passion for his art. At the same time, it really was a Broadway musical about how art is created and how even a musical is created.
Art isn't easy. Every minor detail is a major decision. Have to keep things in scale. Have to hold to your vision. Every time I start to feel defensive, I remember lasers are expensive. What's a little cocktail conversation if it's going to get you your foundation? Lead to a prominent commission, an exhibition in addition. Art isn't easy.
Presentado como un taller en un principio en Playwrights Horizons, el show se trasladó a Broadway antes de que el segundo acto estuviera totalmente elaborado.
That whole Sunday process was just like watching a painting come together, particularly that painting, dot by dot. And as each song came in, as each lyric came in, the picture became more focused and the storytelling clearer. And it literally didn't come together till, I think a day or two before the critics arrived.
Order. Design.
Color and light has to show George's intense, trance-like, obsessive concentration. So, which accounts for the basic theme, which is...
Bum, 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 bum. Red.
When you see a guy do that over and over and over again, and when he's all done, he's got a little, square inch of canvas done, and then he's got to do another square inch. Now he's finished the hat. Now he's got to do another hat. You realize, and that's of course the way everybody who makes art does it.
Red, orange, orange, pick up blue, pick up red, pick up orange from the blue, green, blue, green, blue, green.
Steve Sondheim defines success entirely artistically and within his own vision. I don't think anything else enters into it for him. It makes it tough, I think, for his commercial producers, because they sometimes define success a little differently.
By the blue, purple, yellow, red water, on the green, purple, yellow, red grass.
What Sondheim has is an avant-garde sensibility in a popular art form. But when we start to see musicals about pointillism and making art, the musical has gone a long way from its original popular roots. And I think that is the strength and the weakness of Sondheim.
Sunday in the Park keeps layering on elements that seem pointillistic, that seem self-contained anecdotes.
Made of flecks of light.
And gradually, it all comes together in the first act to form a complete picture. At the same time, Seurat's masterpiece comes together as a painting.
Stephen Sondheim right now is the history of the musical theater. I mean, he's that important. And people inside the theater, people who know theater, people who appreciate it, know that. It's why, in spite of his shows, not necessarily always making money, there's always a line being formed to produce them.
Let us deal with the current crop of scores nominated as the season's best. They are The Ring, music by John Cantor, lyrics by Fred Ebb. Baby, David Shire, lyrics by Richard Mulvey. La Cage aux Folles, music and lyrics by Jerry Herman. Sunday in the Park with George, music and lyrics by Stephen Sondheim. And the winner is La Cage aux Folles, music and lyrics by Jerry Herman.
Cuando Jerry Herman ganó el Tony, fue una validación por ser el compositor de mayor éxito de los años 60 y por su estilo tradicional de composición de canciones.
Thank you. This award forever shatters a myth about the musical theater. There's been a rumor around for a couple of years that the simple, hummable show tune was no longer welcome on Broadway. Well, it's alive and well at the Palace.
We are what we are, and what we are is an illusion.
Herman escribió la música y las letras de Hello, Dolly y Maine, y llevó su maestría para la diversión y vistosidad anticuadas al glamuroso club de travestis en el que estaba ambientado La Jaula de las Locas.
I went to Jerry Herman's apartment, listened to the score. And I said to him, we'll do this show. I thought the music was beautiful. Probably one of the best scores ever written.
Adaptado de una película francesa, La Jaula de las Locas tenía la estructura de una comedia musical convencional. Pero su pareja romántica no tenía nada de convencional.
I made it all about love. This was a couple that had been together for 20-something years. This was the real loving married couple.
Do you recall that windy little beach we walked along?
When we were previewing in Boston, I was very, very nervous about the subject matter, and I said to Harvey Fierstein and Arthur Lawrence, who were huddled with me in the last row of the theater, I said, you know, we're crazy. We're opening the show about transvestites in the city of Boston. We're really crazy.
As we walked on the sand.
It was the first time on the Broadway stage that two men sang a love song to each other.
Through the crash of the waves, I could tell that the words were romantic.
This was a show that in the beginning, when all these guys in drag came out on stage, the men who'd been dragged to see it by their wives covered their faces. At the end of the show, they were standing up and cheering two men dancing off into the sunset. I thought that was quite an accomplishment.
Gay sensibility was always in the theater, but whether we got seen by large groups of people or not is the difference. And this is America, and unless you can make money, it don't count. So, La Cage aux Folles, hardly the first gay musical on Broadway, but the first gay musical to make money, and that's what makes it count.
I think it was a groundbreaking show, and I think it would have been more successful had there not been the AIDS scare at that time.
I am what I am. I am my own special creation.
AIDS. It cut a devastating swath through the talent pool on Broadway. Michael Bennett and Ron Field comes to mind. There's so many people that worked on Broadway that are gone.
We lost an entire generation of musical theater. You know, if musical theater is gay men, and for the most part it is, we lost an entire generation. We lost our children, you know, we lost our youth.
People who might have become famous
a dancer like Tim Scott, just a brilliant supporting performer like Rene Clemente. You know, not the great names that people go, oh my God, what the Broadway theater lost because he died. But so many people from the ranks. The thing about AIDS, it didn't just get the generals. It got the privates. It got the guys in the trenches.
En respuesta a la crisis del SIDA, la compañía de La Jaula de las Locas y otras de la comunidad de Broadway crearon Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS, que ha recaudado más de $65 millones para ayudar a las personas que padecen la enfermedad. La reciente influencia corporativa en Broadway se atribuye a menudo al éxito de la compañía Walt Disney. Pero antes de que el musical de Broadway fuera resucitado por Disney, Disney fue resucitado por el musical de Broadway. Después de más de una década de películas mediocres, Disney tuvo una serie de musicales animados de éxito, muchos escritos por veteranos de Broadway y realizados por narradores de Broadway. Pero producir un musical en vivo en Broadway parecía fuera incluso de la magia de Disney.
Find a thoroughfare. It's the part of little old New York that runs into Times Square.
Just dealing in New York was hard, and, you know, we were ducking bullets in the 70s and garbage trucks, and it was just, you know, forget it, let's go and make movies. And it kind of kept that, resisted, until we made the movie Beauty and the Beast. I think Frank Rich reviewed it as the best musical in New York, but it was a movie. And that got us thinking, and then we decided, you know what, let's give it a shot. And the whole thing kind of fit together in a Disney-esque way. And it's been, I don't know, 10 years, pretty good.
El éxito de Disney con La Bella y la Bestia alentó una inesperada transformación de la propia La Calle 42. Comenzó cuando Michael Eisner visitó el New Amsterdam Theater, que se desmoronaba, la antigua joya de la corona del reino de Florence Ziegfeld.
I'm gonna be a mighty king, so when the beasts beware. I've never seen a king of beasts with quite so little hair.
Somebody called me and said, you want to see the theater? And I said, yeah, why not? And it was dark, and it was raining in the theater, birds were flying around. But you could see what it was.
Nueva York quería llevar la sana imagen de Disney a su zona de diversión de peor aspecto. Pero Disney quería que el alcalde Rudolph Giuliani le asegurara que el vecindario sería seguro para las familias.
I had a little concern about the adjacent nightlife, and he said it'll be gone. I said, well, Mr. Mayor, you know, there is the American Civil Liberties Union. I mean, they're just not gone. He said, look me in the eye. I said, what? He said, look me in the eye. I said, okay. He said, they will be gone. Scared me. I guess they were going to be gone.
El New Amsterdam fue magníficamente restaurado. Y por primera vez en 75 años, las grandes compañías se interesaron por la calle 42 y Times Square.
If you ask anybody walking down the street who is the star of Broadway, everybody's going to say Michael Eisner. The star is the corporation. It's taking show business to a new level of what the meaning of the word is.
We simply came in and did a theater. That's it.
The articles written about that Disney saved 42nd Street, Disney created tourism back in New York, hotels picked up, is very flattering and pretty much untrue.
El show que llegó al renovado New Amsterdam en el otoño de 1997 fue El Rey León, una adaptación de la película de dibujos animados de más éxito de Disney. En él se incluían canciones populares de Elton John con letras de Tim Rice y un coro dirigido por el compositor sudafricano Le Bohem. Pero el verdadero reto era cómo trasladar los personajes animados de la película al escenario.
It is a landscape that people don't think can be put on a stage. It's the animal kingdom. It's an animal parable of life. And yet, I needed to make sure I could keep the human beings present. This was a question in the development of Lion King. Big question in the workshops of, can the audience look at a human face and look at a mask at the same time? Where will they focus? And I'm saying that in the theater, you can expect more from your audiences. They know they're in a theater. The audience is not spoon-fed absolute reality, but they come and they finish the sentences with you.
You know, you work in television, which I've done a lot. You don't feel a reaction. You read that 62 million people watch this and 50 million people watch that. It's empty and it's sterile. But 1,832 people at this theater going crazy is awesome.
One of the best things about The Lion King is that it's not about race and all about race. When white audiences go to see Lion King, they don't think about it. And they get the beauty and the talent of these great performers and the music. And yet if a black audience goes, it's all about race. Because imagine a young African-American child going and seeing a king who's black. It is about a future where racism won't be an issue at all.
El 21 de octubre de 1995, el compositor Jonathan Larson dejó el empleo que tenía como camarero en el Moondance Diner, donde había trabajado durante más de 9 años. Un pequeño teatro del Off-Broadway se había comprometido a producir su nueva ópera de rock.
New talent finds it almost impossible to come up. Jonathan Larson, he wasn't a kid. He had spent years trying to get a show on without success. So it's very hard for the next generation of Sondheims or Kandernebs or Bach and Harnicks to come along.
Larson se había criado justo en las afueras de la ciudad y le encantaba Broadway. Su sueño era crear un nuevo tipo de show para Broadway que atrajera a una generación criada con rock and roll y MTV.
First time I read Rent, the first stage direction was that there is a full Broadway orchestra in the pit and there's a rock band on the stage. And I always think that perfectly defines who he was. He was someone who was as much wanting to be a part of a musical theater tradition as he wanted to blow it up and change it and reinvent it.
We were really developing Rent for the East Village. It's a modern reimagining of La Boheme in the East Village. there was a wonderful marriage between contemporary music and storytelling, the likes of which the musical theater hadn't seen for a while, or the opera hadn't seen for a while. He was working from an urgent place, working through of a number of his friends becoming ill. And what's absolutely best and most meaningful about Rent is the stuff that's closest to Jonathan's heart, and the stuff that is closest to the material, which was about him dealing with a lot of friends' death from AIDS.
One song, glory. One song before I go, glory. One song to leave behind. Find one song, one last refrain, glory from the pretty boy front man who wasted opportunity. One song, he had the world at his feet, glory in the eyes of a younger.
Durante los agotadores ensayos técnicos de Rent, Jonathan Larson fue admitido en el hospital 2 veces con síntomas similares a los de la gripe. La noche anterior al preestreno falleció de repente no de SIDA, sino de un problema cardíaco no diagnosticado. Tenía 35 años.
Time flies, time
And what happened in those days following his death is that he became a part of the musical. And of course, those issues in the musical about loss pound in our ears and beat in our chests. And we all sort of took a lesson from the musical about how to move forward and how to take care of ourselves.
El éxito de Rent en el Off-Broadway provocó el traslado al Nederlander Theater, donde se ha representado más de 3.000 veces.
525,600 minutes, 525,000 moments so dear.
Rent feels like a celebration, but it's actually about surviving great loss and great devastation. And I really love the sentiment of being able to measure our time here and our success here by how much love we put out and how much love comes back to us.
Seasons of
A Jonathan Larson le concedieron el premio Pulitzer dramático a título póstumo. Su familia ha empleado los derechos de autor de Rent para crear una fundación dedicada a ayudar a que los jóvenes compositores dejen sus empleos y hagan sus sueños realidad.
no day but today.
Durante más de 20 años, los admiradores de Broadway podían comprar entradas con descuento en 2 lugares: calle 47 y Broadway, y en la segunda torre del World Trade Center. El 11 de septiembre de 2001, todo cambió.
When 9/11 happened, the entire world was grieving, and especially New York was grieving, and there was no relief from it.
Times Square, la encrucijada del mundo, estuvo casi desierta durante los días posteriores al ataque, y también los teatros de Broadway.
Come here and spend money. Go to a restaurant, a play. You might actually have a better chance of getting tickets to the producers now.
These little town blues are melting away.
We'll make a brand new start of it.
At first, it seemed inappropriate to go to the theater, but in fact, it became almost like medicine. Top-notch performers doing their best to make you have a little relief from that grief.
Come to New York.
York, and let's go on with the show.
Right now, people want more of an escape, you know, as they did after World War II. So for the next 5-10 years, I think we're going to see more musical comedies.
Al igual que otros éxitos actuales, Hairspray, el éxito de la temporada de 2002, estaba basado en un largometraje. Con costes de producción de más de $10 millones, más y más productores limitan sus apuestas a títulos reconocibles que atraigan público a Broadway.
I would not know where to come by $10 million to put on a big musical today.
7.5 cents doesn't buy a hell of a lot. 7.5 cents doesn't mean a thing.
By 1954, when I did my first show as a producer, we needed $250,000. We only spent $169,000. But you could see the costs escalating. And you could see by the time I did Follies, that was 1971, and that was the most expensive musical ever done. 550 elaborate costumes, incredible scene changes, a huge cast. It cost $800,000 to do. You can't get much for $800,000 today.
El mayor show de 2003 fue Wicked, una apuesta de $14 millones que reflejan cómo se cruzan el arte y el comercio en Broadway. Creado por Mark Platt, el productor de Hollywood, Wicked es la segunda producción de Broadway financiada por Universal Studios.
A film can generate an awful lot of money very quickly, almost immediately over a 3-day weekend. The scariest thing about the theater is it could open and nobody saw what you saw, and in a very short time, it's just gone.
The wickedest witch there ever was, the enemy of all us human hearts, is dead.
Wicked es un musical de libreto tradicional adaptado a partir de una novela original. Su atractivo comercial radica en la fascinación estadounidense por el mago de Oz. Pero producir una fantasía mágica en Broadway significa hacer frente a una dura realidad económica.
The theater is a handmade enterprise. There are no economies of scale or economies of technology. Costumes, sets are handmade, created for the particular show. It's a highly labor-intensive process.
Wicked strikes me as huge. I've never been in anything this kind of spectacular nature.
I mean, the first notes of the show with the orchestra go like.
It's an enormous show. I don't think the enormity of it really hits you until you do a run through and go, oh, now I see the overview.
Monkeys fly and there are magic tricks. There were so many visual demands that it was going to be hard to tell much more from a workshop. Therefore, for better or worse, we had to do a production.
San Francisco is really an old-fashioned pre-Broadway tryout. Used to be you would go to a few different cities and then come in. You'd work on it out of town away from sort of New York vultures. You're really coming together to go into New York and face what is an enormous amount of pressure.
You must take a show out of town. You're creating something brand new. And you must have the ability to work on that piece of material, to change something, to add a song, to throw out a scene, to change a performer if necessary. And you can't do that on 45th Street.
San Francisco is about gathering information. You really have to find a way to process the information, listen to the audience, listen to ourselves and our instincts and say, okay, now where do we want to go with this?
So I didn't explain that very well. So when she
Durante las 8 semanas anteriores a la noche de estreno, se cortaron escenas, se escribieron nuevos diálogos y canciones y se cambiaron los intérpretes de 9 papeles, incluido el papel de mago.
You work right into the bitter end. There's a phrase that says that the show is frozen, which we try to do a few days before opening, but really, you're tweaking that show until the critics come.
Popular, I'll help you be popular. You'll hang with our right cohort, you'll be good at sports, know the slang you've got to know. So, oh my gosh, thank you.
Tonight is opening night. Day before Halloween.
You only have one opening night. And it will never be like this again.
It's either live or die by opening night. Something that could have been 5 years in coming and $10 million can go down in 2 hours.
I know about popular, and with an assist from me to be who you'll be instead of dreary who you were, well, are. There's nothing that can stop you from becoming popular. La,
Tonight we'll know what some of our critics feel, but hopefully it is the perception that the people have that above all else will survive and whatever the critics think.
Up here! Alfie! Up here! It's me! So if you care to find me, look to the western sky. As someone told me lately, everyone deserves a chance to fly. A lot of the reviews will be out, and I'm not going to say it doesn't matter, but we're doing our show. We're telling this story. We're asking people to go on this
I think it's
journey.
bigger than us now.
I'm flying high, defying gravity, and soon I'll match them in renown. And nobody in all of us, no wizard that there is or was, is ever gonna bring me
En las reseñas del show, la opinión de los críticos estaba dividida. Pero en la primera temporada navideña, en el Gershwin Theater, batió récords de taquilla. Según los productores, el show recuperará los $14 millones invertidos en un año y medio si son capaces de vender 1.300 entradas en todas y cada una de las representaciones.
Could be, who knows?
I've been hearing about Broadway disappearing ever since I put on long pants. I mean, it's been the fabulous invalid, you know, but it survives. It survives.
It'd make 'em cannonballing down through the sky, gleaming its eye, bright as a rose.
En junio de 2003, el mundo de Broadway se reunió para dar un nuevo nombre a un teatro en honor a Al Hirschfeld. Durante más de 75 años, captó el espíritu del musical según evolucionó.
The form changes, and that's difficult for a lot of people to accept. They're stuck in one period, and they think that's the period that's important. But it could be just a passing fancy nobody even takes seriously in another 50 years. It changes, and you have to roll with the punches, I think.
The air is humming, and something great is coming.
It's never, ever going to breathe its last. Why? Because it is as large as life.
When you go to a Broadway musical, You remember every moment of that night.
It's only just out of reach, down the block on a beach, maybe tonight.
It's live, and anything can happen.
There's Malachevsky, Rubinstein, Arensky, and Tchaikovsky, Sapelnikov, Dmitriev, Cherepin, Krzyzanowski, Godowski, Arto, Buchok, Monayushka, Wakimenko, Soloviev, Prokofiev, Tyapkin, Goryschenko, there's Glinkler, Winkler, Bortniansky, Rebekov, Felinsky, Metr, Malakirov, Zolotorov, and Kwashinsky, and Sokolov, and Kopolov, Dukelsky, and Klanovsky, and Shostakovich, Boda, Dinglier, and Novakovsky, there's Lyadov, and Karganov, Barkevich, Panchenko, and Dargomisky, Cherbachev, Skriapa, Vasilyenko, Saravinsky, Rimsky, Korsakov, Pusorsky, and Grachaninoff, and Glazunov, and Caesar, Kuikalini, Karnov, Stravinsky, and Grachaninoff, Rumshinsky, and Rachmaninoff. I really have to stop. The subject has been well upon enough.